So it's my pleasure to introduce Kevin Abourezk, who's going to be our lunchtime speaker today. Kevin's a graduate of the University of South Dakota and a graduate of the University of Nebraska-lincoln. And he's now currently the night editor at the Lincoln Journal-Star, our local newspaper. So Kevin, thank you.
Thank you. Well, first, I want to thank you for having me here. I'm deeply honored and humbled to have this opportunity. My name is actually, we're just talking to, I'm sorry, what was your name, sir? Larry, I'm sorry. I'm just talking to Larry about that. My name is actually Middle Eastern. My father is part Lebanese, and my mother is Native American. When I say father, he's my stepfather, so my biological father is actually Native American as well. And I'm enrolled in the Rosebud Sioux tribe of South Dakota. I grew up in South Dakota and moved here probably about 17 years ago. I've been with the newspaper for 17 years. And obviously graduated of the University of South Dakota in Vermillion, South Dakota. And graduated in 2012 with a master's from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln in journalism. Kind of an odd duck in this room, I think, in that sense. But I think hopefully my story can maybe give you some idea on, I guess, how to achieve your dreams the way that I feel that I've achieved mine. So thank you for having me again. I have a little presentation here. I'll start with that and just kind of go from there. So I was born in Grand Forks, North Dakota. I have a coworker at the Journal-Star who gives me crap about this all the time because he's from North Dakota. I grew up in South Dakota, and he makes fun of me and says, "Oh, you're really from North Dakota. You need to accept that. You need to embrace that." But I never have. I never will. I don't remember anything about North Dakota. In fact, this photo he sent me in the upper right corner, he said, "This is where you lived after you were born," because my parents were in student family housing at the University of North Dakota after I was born. Apparently, these tin huts were the student family housing apartments. That's where I lived. Not long after I was born, my parents split up, and my mom moved herself and I back to the reservation, the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. That's where she grew up, and that's where her family is from. My dad is Rosebud, and as I said, that's where I'm enrolled. But I've always been so much more associated with the Pine Ridge Reservation because I've had that association with my mother and her family. I don't know how much you know about the Pine Ridge Reservation. There's certainly a lot to be heard about it in the news. Certainly a lot of movies have been made about the Pine Ridge Reservation, books written, articles written. I've written a few of them. It's a place of beauty. It's an amazing place. Badlands are part of the Pine Ridge Reservation. There's nothing like the Badlands. It's just a gorgeous, gorgeous place. So it's a place of beauty. One of the things I'll say about my life growing up there is that there was a deep sense of culture and family there, rooted inside everything. I remember I wanted to go to a powwow once, and I'd never danced before in my life, but they were giving $2 out to every child who participated in this powwow, and I wanted that $2, and it was actually a $2 bill. I really wanted that $2 bill, So my Uncle Carlo, at the last minute, decided to put together a regalia for me. It was pretty amazing, actually. He took some cardboard, and he took some, the plastic linings for the 6 packs of pop that you get. Somehow used that and a few feathers to make a bustle for my back. So I had a makeshift bustle, kind of at the last minute, and I think some fringe, some buckskin. And I went and I danced, and I got my $2 bill. But I was really raised by a village there. My uncles were my fathers, my aunts were my mothers, my cousins were my brothers and my sisters. I never thought of them as anything other than that. They were never cousins or uncles or aunts, the way that mainstream society thinks of that. My cousin lived right across the street from me. I'd go over to his house every single morning to play, or he'd come over to my house to play. And so I just grew up in that sort of sense of just beauty and culture. And I'll also say this about it, and if you grew up on a reservation, you probably understand this, is that everybody was poor. But nobody knew that. Because when everybody's poor and you're part of that community, you don't see it as much until you leave, until you step away and you see that your conditions, the way that you were living isn't the same as everybody else. I grew up in a 2-bedroom home. My mother and I slept on a mattress on the floor in one corner, and my uncle and his wife and 3 children slept on a mattress on the opposite side. My grandparents lived right next to us in their room, and that's how I grew up. My grandpa would wake me up every morning and make me peanut butter crackers, and he'd sing a prayer song. And we'd sit on the porch, and it was a magical time in my life. It was amazing. And as I said here, I've never since, other than, I guess there has to be an exception here. I've never since felt as close to a group of people as I did to my family when I lived on the reservation, except my family now, my immediate family now. Certainly that is a reminder of that sense I had when I was growing up. Now, Pine Ridge is also a place of despair. I like to start with the beauty part of it first, though, because that's what I knew. That's what I remember about it the most. After I moved away, this is kind of what I was shown, what I came to understand more so. I think that's important. That's an important distinction to make, is that oftentimes the people living on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation don't see it the way that other people see it. It's not as ugly to them. It's not as mean, But this is what a lot of people see of the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. They see it as a place of despair. White Clay, Nebraska, for example, is always in the headlines. It's a place where 4 beer stores last year sold 3.5 million cans of beer, mostly to residents of the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, where alcohol is banned in all forms. You can't even cross the reservation in it with beer in your car. So prohibition is absolute on the reservation, yet this place flourishes because people just are able to cross the border. It's only about a mile away from Pine Ridge itself. They cross the border and they buy their beer in White Clay from these 4 beer stores. As I said here, it's a tragedy. It really is. I remember oftentimes in the afternoons, probably around 2 or 3, I'd have cousins and uncles who would come to the house who didn't have cars, and my grandparents had a car, and they'd ask somebody to give them a ride to White Clay. And they didn't have to say, I'm going to buy some beer. Everybody knew that's what was going to happen. And it was very rooted in our culture, that alcohol, my grandparents didn't drink, my mother didn't drink, but it was always understood that some people in our family were going to drink, and nobody was going to try to stop them. So that sort of acceptance of alcohol was very much rooted in our culture. And I think in order really to defeat alcoholism, you have to understand that it isn't just this that you have to get rid of. It's that acceptance that each family has for alcohol, for this sort of culture of drinking, that you really have to fight. But I also remember White Clay as kind of a nice place, too. I bought my first pair of Adidas when I was there. And I remember those pair of shoes to this day. I couldn't find quite a picture of the ones I bought. That was the closest I came. There were 2 grocery stores there. You could buy shoes, you could buy other goods there. So it wasn't just the beer stores. And it isn't today either. But of course, the beer stores is mainly what we see. My family has a strong legacy of activism. This is my grandmother, Cecilia Jumping Bull, and her husband is Harry Jumping Bull. And it was on their land in 1973 that there was a shootout. There were 2 FBI agents who were killed on my family's land. And later on, a man named Leonard Peltier was convicted of murdering those FBI agents. That all happened on my family's land. It all happened on the property that I grew up on, where I used to play in the creek and pick choke cherries and buffalo berries, and we'd have sweat lodges. And strangely enough, I never really learned about this legacy until I moved away from the reservation. It wasn't something that my family really embraced when I was young. The shootout that happened wasn't something that my family was proud of. It was very much a dark stain on our family, on this land. We kind of wanted to forget about it. It was only later that I realized what had happened there and how momentous that incident really was. Now later on, I guess I was only in about 3rd grade when I moved off the reservation. My mother met a man, my stepfather, Mike Abourezk, and decided to go live with him. And he was getting his law degree, actually, at the University of South Dakota in Vermilion. So we moved off the reservation to go live with him as he went to school. And so I got to live off the reservation. It was a terrifying experience for me, as it is, I think, for anybody, no matter how old you are, to leave that kind of a community where, you know, you have your family around you, have your culture around you, you have everything you know and you love, and to have to step away from that and go somewhere where you're not comfortable at all, where you look different, where your mannerisms, your speech is different. You know, I had a really strong accent at that time, and I'd have kids sometimes make fun of me in Vermilion because of my accent. So I learned quickly to get rid of that accent. You know, that's something that I shed as quick as I could. But there were a lot of good things about living off the reservation, too. I'll say one thing definitely that was great about it was that there were great schools off the reservation. The school that I grew up in Oglala, South Dakota, wasn't a very good school. You know, I moved back for a year when I was in probably 4th grade, and I had to help the teacher in that school teach some of the kids to read, because some of the kids couldn't read, and I could read better than the other children, and I could do a lot of these subjects a lot better than the other children. So she would have me help teach some of the subjects. Yeah. After Vermilion, South Dakota, after my dad got his law degree, we moved to Winter, South Dakota, which is kind of south-central South Dakota. And he went to work there for a while for a law firm, and then we moved not far from there in Gregory, South Dakota, just down the road. And he went to work for a firm there. And that's where I kind of had my formative years, probably from about 5th grade till I graduated high school. It was a great place. You can see there, that's one of the places I loved playing, were these twin buttes that were in the town. The town was, of course, flat like every other part of South Dakota, except the Black Hills. But they had these twin buttes here. My friend and I would go up there and we'd play all the time. Or, you know, there's a park down below, and so that was really kind of our playground. You know, one of the things I'll say, and I'm sure so many of you can relate to this, is that when you live outside of your community, whether it's outside of your reservation community or maybe your Hispanic community or whatever community you come from that isn't like the one you're an educator. You have to be an educator. And people will look to you for that. But you have to understand that you have a responsibility to be an educator. And it's not always something that you're going to be happy about. I'm not happy about it sometimes. You know, I get asked a lot of dumb questions, to be real honest, you know. But I try to approach those things as gracefully as I can, you know, and try not to get frustrated when people ask me dumb questions. Truthfully, there aren't any dumb questions, but sometimes it feels like there are. So, you know, as a reporter, I get this a lot, too. You know, I get calls all the time about some of the articles that I write. And there are a lot of people out there who really have no idea about Native society or culture or history. They don't understand a lot of things that are going on. And they call and they want to complain about something that I wrote about a Native community. And the refrain, almost always, the undercurrent under all these complaints is, why don't they just pick themselves up and get jobs and get into the workforce and stop complaining, you know, stop feeding off the government. And that sort of attitude, it just fails to understand so many of the things that have formed and shaped Native societies into what they are today. There are a lot of Native people, probably everybody in this room, who pick themselves up and are doing great things, and it's so great to see all of you here because of that. Anytime I'm in a room like this, I get very hopeful. But at the same time, there are a lot of people who may not ever do that. I have so many cousins and uncles and aunts still on the reservation who never want to leave and will never leave because they like the way that they live. They like being around their family and that culture. And if I'd never been pulled away from the reservation by my mother and my stepfather, I might be there too. I went to the University of South Dakota in Vermilion, starting in 1998, and graduated about 5 years later. I was on the 5-year plan. You can see there a little about why it took me 5 years rather than 4 years. One of the pivotal things that's happened to me in my life was getting clean and sober. This was back in 1999. In fact, 1996, sorry. On November 20th, I'll celebrate 20 years clean and sober. And so I'm very proud of that. Some people love to celebrate their birthday. I love to celebrate my sobriety birthday because that's the day that I was really kind of reborn. And I like to share this experience because it's important. You know, Native people, we suffer a lot of times from alcoholism and drug addiction. I just don't think, I think it's genetic, I think it's atmospheric, I think there's a lot of reasons for that, but it's true. And it's something that we have to face, and we have to accept that sometimes we're going to encounter these kinds of challenges in our life. I could not have graduated college though if I hadn't gotten sober. My dad didn't want me to go, actually, when I told him that I wanted to go to treatment. He tried to talk me out of it. I was about a year away from graduation, and I was failing my classes. You know, I wasn't going to class. I was missing tests. I was missing homework assignments, and just about ready to get expelled from school. And I told him I have to do this. You know, I have to get sober. Otherwise, I'm not going to graduate. This isn't going to happen for me. And he didn't want me to go. He wasn't going to help me go. And finally, I went against his wishes. I didn't tell him until I'd been there about 2 weeks. And I called him up on the phone. I said, Dad, I'm at treatment. I've been here a couple of weeks. I said, you need to go get back to school. You need to get back to your classes. I think you can still finish off the semester. I said, no. My teachers have allowed me to step away for a couple weeks here, or about a month here. And I can finish my coursework for this semester later on. I had a great university system, great support system there. So I went and I stepped away from my life for about a month, and I came back and been clean and sober ever since. It was, you know, the most transformative thing that's ever happened to me. This is my life today. As you can see, I've got a big family. The lady in the robe isn't part of my family. She's actually the judge that was there during the adoption ceremony. This photo is from our last adoption, which is the little girl here. Her name is Jessa. We just adopted her back in May. These two are biological. It's Maya and Samuel. And this is Zach. He was the first one we adopted, probably about, let's see, he's 9, so about 5 years ago. This is Jaslyn. She is 5, and we adopted her about 2 years ago. And Jaslyn and Jess are half sisters. Hard to tell, you know. The same mother, different fathers. This is something that I've always wanted to do. In my tribe alone, in the Rosebud Sioux tribe where I'm enrolled, there are over 300 children needing placement. Foster placement, adoptive placement. Huge, huge need for Native American foster homes and adoptive homes. And very, very few such homes in existence. So my wife and I, we had 2 perfectly healthy, beautiful children of our own, a boy and a girl, you know, luckily. Because we might have been one if we hadn't got one of the others. But luckily we had a boy and a girl, healthy, and we decided to adopt from there. We decided we wanted to help other children. So 5 years ago, we got a friend on the phone who was from the Rosebud Sioux tribe, and we asked her, because we knew she worked for the Indian Child, or the Child Welfare Department for our tribe. We asked her, what do you think about us being an adoptive family or a foster home? And within a week, she had found us Zach. And a week after I made that call, far sooner than I was comfortable with, really, honestly, we met Zach at a McDonald's in Sioux City, and I swear, the first time I saw that boy, I fell in love. I knew that I wanted to adopt him. So I did, and we kept doing it. In 2012, I earned a master's degree. That was a long time coming. I actually had started that degree when I first moved here back in 1999, and then stepped away from it for, probably about 6 years or so as I built my family and built my career. But I decided I always wanted to finish it. You know, I always wanted to get a master's, and education is something nobody can take from you. Something that nobody can take from you. You can lose a job. You know, you can lose a relationship. You can lose a child. You know, but your education is the one thing that you'll have for the rest of your life. So I wanted that master's degree, and it was hard earned. You know, going to school, having children, adoptive children, working full time, but it was definitely worth it. I want to talk a little bit about my career as a journalist. Obviously, journalism, that path isn't probably what most of you are probably looking toward. But I will say that journalism has been very rewarding for me. It's taking me places I never would have gone otherwise. It's giving me skills, and it's helped me develop relationships that I never dreamed I would have. I've been to Bosnia, I've been to France, all over the country, reservations all over the United States, writing about people in various situations. In Bosnia, we wrote about people who were trying to, Muslims mainly, who were trying to rebuild their country after the Bosnian Civil War. And it was amazing. I got to interview a man in a cemetery where he had gone to visit the gravesite of his brother. And he cried and talked about his brother in front of this gravesite. And how many careers do you think would allow you to do that? To be in Bosnia interviewing a man standing in front of his brother's tombstone, half a world away. It was an amazing experience. I got to visit Paris, France, and I got to visit the Euro Disney there. They actually have, I guess at the time, I don't know if they still have this, but when we went there, this is probably 6 or 7 years ago now, they had a thing called the Buffalo Bill Wild West Show. It was fascinating on so many levels, just so many levels. I don't know how much you know about the Little Bighorn Battle, otherwise known as Custer's Last Stand. I'm sorry, I didn't research the numbers here. I'm not exactly sure how many of Custer's men were killed, but there was a cavalry colonel at the time who was wiped out by a force of Oglala, or not Oglala, I guess just Sioux, and in Cheyenne, and they reenact this battle at Euro Disney in Paris, and it's funny because they use Crow riders to play the part of the Sioux. Now at the actual battle, the Crow were the scouts for General Custer. So that's really fascinating to have them now play the Sioux, in this performance, this reenactment in Paris. So yeah, just things like that. I mean, I can't begin to describe the number of strange juxtapositions in that experience. But it was wonderful, and it's great to be able to write about that. So I've written about a lot of other things. Obviously, I've written about white clay. I talk a lot about sort of the ugly things that people see of Native people, and I'm partly guilty for that. And I struggle with that every day. It's one of the things I try to do as a Native reporter is I try to balance these things. I understand that in order for good things to come to Native communities, in order for positive change to occur, that a light needs to be shined in these dark places. And I'd like to hopefully see my journalism as that light. But I also understand that when you present Native people, when you present minority communities in a negative light, that people start to get stereotypes about them. People start to see them in a negative way. And that you then have a responsibility to combat that, to show people that not all Native people are this way. So I try to write positive articles. I try to find good things to write about. One of the things I write about a lot, actually, is the Nebraska Commission on Indian Affairs and the good work that they do in the community. So that's one of the ways I try to write about different Native people who are doing really good things for their community. So. And when I go to Pine Ridge, I always try to find positive stories to tell when I'm there too. Even if I'm there, my main purpose is to write about white clay or something like that. I'll try to find people who are doing good to try to combat this, people who are doing good for their families and for their children and those things. So, I think that's it. I guess I'd open up for questions if anybody had any questions. Okay. Well, thank you very much. It's been great to talk to you. Thank you very much.